you please give us a 5-minute remark?
Okay, thank you. Dear brothers and sisters, happy Vesak Day, Ashitale. I extend warm welcome to each and every one of you to our webinar today. It is a pleasure to have such an esteemed our moderator, speaker, attendees gather here for what promises to be an enlightening discussion. Today, we have a unique opportunity to delve into a pivotal in the Tibetan history, the 17th-Point Agreement of 1951 between Tibetan representatives and Beijing governments of People's Republic of China. This agreement holds immense significance, not just for Tibetan, but for the broader understanding of geopolitical dynamics in the region. As we embark in this journey through history, it is important to recognize the complexity and nuances surrounding the 17th point of agreement. Signed against the backdrop of political turbulence and shifting power dynamics. This agreement marks a crucial juncture in the relations between Tibet and China. For Tibetan, the 17th-Point Agreement represents both hope and apprehension. On one hand, it held a promise of autonomy and the protection of Tibetan culture and religions within the framework of Chinese governance. On the other hand, it raised concern about the erosion of Tibetan sovereignty and the imposition of external control. Our speaker today brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to shed light on the various dimensions of the 17th-Point Agreement. They will share insight into its historical context. It is, do you hear me?
Yes, please, proceed.
Okay. It is implication for Tibetan identity and autonomies, and its legacy in shaping the trajectory of Tibet-China relations. As we engage in this discussion, I encourage all the participants to approach the topic with an open mind and spirit of inquiry. Let's explore the dynamic of history with the intellectual curiosity and respect for the various perspective. Before I proceed, I want to express my gratitude to our esteemed moderator, Dr. Atta, for organizing this amazing webinar. And also I gratitude to our speaker for their willingness to share their expertise with us today. Your insights are invaluable in deepening understanding of the pivotal moment in this Tibetan history. To our attendees, thank you for joining us. Your presence enrich our discussion and contribute to the richness of our collective learning experience. Without further ado, let's begin our exploration of the 17th-Point Agreement. I'm pleased to hand over the virtual stage to moderator Dr. Atta to kickstart our conversation. Please welcome Dr. Atta. We are excited to have you lead this discussion and share your insight with us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamyang. Wherever we are in our different location, we are actually clapping for you. Thank you for such brilliant opening remark. In other spaces, that's already a full presentation, I must confess to you, my dear friend. Colleagues, without further ado, may I invite Mr. Guy Lieberman. He will be the first presenter for this afternoon. The way the webinar is designed is that we will let our two presenters give us a talk. Then I'm going to prompt them as we do in research. After that, we open up discussion for whoever has a comment, a question, or whatever. Please, Mr. Guy, you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Atta, Dr. Atta, and everyone here. It's wonderful to see some old friends and beautiful faces that I haven't seen for a long time. Thank you. So in preparation for this webinar, I decided to look into, just actually do a deep dive and go into the 17-point agreements themselves. You know, I'm imagining that this would be watched over time and perhaps by many more people than are on this webinar now. Many of you know about the details, many don't. And I found it a fascinating study, you know, having been to Tibet, and I was there for the 1997 Hong Kong handover, and I seen firsthand the Chinese handling of the Tibetan people, you know, interacting with Chinese soldiers and Tibetans through my travels. I realized that the, you know, principles of the 17-point agreement are at such a vast distance from what they were claimed to do to soon after, you know, this, you know, when the genocide really took place, this was within the years following. It was, you know, so I find that going through the actual point, what was China's aim here? What were they saying? Did they themselves believe that this was going to be played out inside Tibet? Because if so, then I mean, it was such a fantastic departure. So I'm going to run through it, and then we can obviously drill down further. We have several expert Tibetans, Dr. Thupten Gyatso, Mr. Thupten Gyatso, of course, is our, you know, preeminent expert here. I'm just a friend of the Tibetans. But let's jump in. So the first point of the 17-point agreement: the Tibetan people shall unite and drive out imperialist aggressive force from Tibet. The Tibetan people shall return to the big family of the motherland, People's Republic of China. According to all facts on the ground, there were no imperialist aggressive forces inside Tibet at the time. So this is a very strange first point on which to begin this agreement. Number two, the local government of Tibet shall actively assist the People's Liberation Army, the PLA, to enter Tibet and consolidate the national defenses. Basically, we're taking over and you're going to join up with us. There is no choice. Point number three, in accordance with the policy towards nationalities laid down in the common program of the CPPCC, which is the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, the Tibetan people have the right of exercising national, regional autonomy under the unified leadership of the Central People's Government. Point number four, well, we know that, okay, we know where that wins. Point number four, the central authorities will not alter the existing political system in Tibet. The central authorities will also not alter the established status, functions, and power of the Dalai Lama. Officials of various ranks shall hold office as usual. Point number five, the established status, functions, powers of the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Nergatini, the Panchen Lama, as we know, will be will be maintained. Now, this is an important note here because they acknowledge that the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama are, need each other for the continual line of the Dalai Lama's seat. And number 6 is by the established status, functions, and powers of the Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama. They meant the status, functions, and power of the 13th Dalai Lama and the Panchen Lama when they were friendly and had amicable relations with each other. This is interesting. As long as they were in contact and they were close, everything would be fine. You know very well what happened with the Panchen Lama. So that lasted half a lifetime. That's that point. Point number 7, the policy of freedom of religious belief laid down in the common program of the CPCC shall be carried out. The religious beliefs, customs, and habits of the Tibetan people shall be respected, and the Lama monasteries shall be protected. The central authorities will not affect a change in the income of the monasteries. This is just preceding the destruction of 6,000 monasteries inside Tibet. So basically, what's interesting here is that the principle and the approach that the Chinese authorities took then, and they take now in their relations with various African nations, for example, that's relevant to us. There is a departure from what's stated to how things are acted upon. And this is a very, serious point to note. Point number 8, Tibetan troops shall be reorganized step by step into the PLA and become part of the National Defense Force of the PRC. Basically, we're absorbing your National Defense Forces into the army, into the People's Federation Army. Point number 9, the spoken and written language and school education of the Tibetan nationality shall be developed step by step in accordance with the actual condition in Tibet. And as we know very well, the Chinese policy of teaching Tibetan children in Chinese has created this wedge between the generations from that time. So essentially, they are trying to carve away the younger generation from the older generation. And when they take their children to the schools, it's only Chinese. So this is a particularly tragic point to note over here, because they did actually not alter this in any way, shape, or form. Point number 10, Tibetan agriculture, livestock raising, industry, and commerce shall be developed step by step, and the people's livelihood shall be improved step by step in accordance with the actual condition in Tibet. I think, anyone who's been to Tibet will see that one of the things that the Chinese never really accommodated was the sensitivity of the environment in Tibet. So they tried different forms of farming, or they locked in the nomads to certain areas. And one of the things about the nomadic culture is that it helped, as they moved around, it helped maintain that very thin, sort of like healthy topsoil inside Tibet. And I've witnessed personally huge mudslides and forests that have been, denuded by, very sort of rapacious Chinese governments. So this approach might have been, more like a template, but it didn't have any it wasn't in touch with reality, the ecological realities on the ground, never mind the cultural realities. Point 11, in matters related to various reforms in Tibet, there will be no compulsion on the part of the central authorities. Basically, we're hands off. The local government of Tibet should carry out reforms of its own accord, and when the people raise demands for reform, they shall be settled by means of consultation with the leading personnel of Tibet. Well, that didn't seem to go very far at all. In terms of how they have engaged the authorities. Basically, there was no local authority that kept coming from the decisions made kept coming from the central leadership in China. Point number 12, insofar as the pro-Kuomintang officials resolutely sever relations with imperialist and Kuomintang, now this was the Chinese political party that ruled mainland China from 1927 to 1949, prior to its relocation to Taiwan as a result of the Chinese Civil War. So the name of the party translates as China's National People's Party and was historically referred to as Chinese nationalists. Now, what's fascinating is today, this is playing out itself with China's military actions around Taiwan since the new leader has come in. So this sort of like relationship, this division within the Chinese political landscape remains to this day. So basically, they said they as long as the Kuomintang, those who were aligned, don't engage in sabotage or resistance, they may continue to hold office irrespective of their past. So basically, if you hold the party line, you can move forward with us. Point 13, the People's Liberation Army entering Tibet shall abide by the above-mentioned policies and shall also be fair in all buying and selling and shall not arbitrarily take a needle or thread from the people. That is a tragic statement. I can't imagine they will. I have no idea they believe any of this. Point 14, the CPG shall have centralized handling of all external affairs of the area of Tibet, and there will be peaceful coexistence with neighboring countries and establishment and development of fair commercial and trading relations with them on the basis of equality, mutual benefit, and mutual respect for territory and sovereignty. Nothing more to say on that note. It says it all. Point 15, in order to ensure the implementation of this agreement, the CPG shall set up a military and administrative committee and a military HQ in Tibet. And apart from the personnel sent there by the CPG, they'll try and absorb as many local Tibetan personnel as possible to take part in the work. Local Tibetan personnel taking part in the military and administrative committee may include patriotic elements from the local government in Tibet, basically, again, driving a wedge within the Tibetan society, and various districts and various principal monasteries, and the name list shall be set forth after consultation between the representatives by the CPG and various quarters concerned and shall be submitted to the CPG for appointment. So basically, if you state that you're aligned and you show a patriotic position with China, we will benefit and be built up into the administration. Point 16, funds needed by the military and administrative committee, the military area HQ and the PLA entering Tibet shall be provided by the CPG. The local government of Tibet should assist the PLA in the purchase and transport of food, fodder, and other daily necessities. So not only are we taking over, but you're going to pay for half of it. And 17, which is, says so much about the deeper intent. This agreement shall come into force immediately after signatures and seals are fixed on. Now, according to His Holiness and what's well known in history, Nagpo Nawang Jigne, who signed the agreement with false seals at the time, had no authority on signing this agreement. And so this all happened under massive duress. So, look, there is a lot to unpack here. And I've taken my time on this, but I think Dr. Atta, can we open up to the to Tubden Yatsola, and I would be very interested to hear his position and to hear where the Tibetans are holding on this on the 73rd anniversary of the 17th-Point agreement. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Guy. What a brilliant way of articulating point after point of the entire 17th-Point agreement. I'm sure we all have a lot of interrogations to make on that. We shall do that when we come to the Q&A session. Colleagues, I should also acknowledge that we are on various social media platforms. from Tibettv, and our Dolma is our person in charge to ensure that this webinar is in good condition. I would like to invite my great friend Tibetan to give us a 15-minute presentation on his side, and then I will come back and talk our two speakers so we understand more in terms of the focus area of the webinar this afternoon. Thank you, Tibetan. Over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
We can hear
Okay.
you.
Dashi Delay, first of all, I would like to grant my warm greetings to Venerable Kempo Jamyala from Office of Tibet and South Africa, and my friend Dr. Atta as a moderator of this webinar, and my colleague from South Africa, Mr. Ki. His presentation has been technically really interesting, and his lecture of the whole provision of the so-called 17th-Point agreement. So I would like to come back on the historical circumstance and situation under which Tibetan delegation were under pressure, was under pressure, under constraint. So this is a well-known point. But if we look back to the situation in terms of the context, historical context, we were in 1949, 1st October 1949, the current Chinese communist regime has proclaimed its foundation, its independence after, as Guy remarked, after the civil war between nationalist force Kuomintang and communist for power struggle, with help of the Stalin, Union Soviet regime, which is, at that time it was a group of Eastern European countries, some kind of a federation or confederation regime. So after 1 year, nearly 1 year, 7th of October 1950, China's Southwest region military under the leadership of the two generals who massed up their militaries to the Eastern Tibet, although, some other major party of the Tam and Amdo areas were under nominal so-called nationalist party. But anyway, as far as regarding Central Tibet is concerned, the 7th of October 1950, they reached already Chamdo, well-known Chamdo, the station there, and they asked through the Chamdo Tibetan Political Commerce Governor, Galung Pungawan Jigmi, to negotiate the entry towards Lhasa capital and to manage in some kind of legitimacy for the invasion, military invasion. So Tibetan government at that time charged several different delegations. At the first time, at the same year, around November, 3rd November, Tibet has sent a high-level rank delegation after having negotiated with Beijing, and they were agreed to carry negotiation on Hong Kong, and the Tibetan government has sent a delegation to India through Calcutta to try to enter Hong Kong. But at that time, British government denied the visa for Hong Kong, so they could not go to Hong Kong to negotiate with the Chinese government. And the Tibetan delegation in New Delhi at that time met Chinese ambassador of the time, and they discussed preliminary discussions, first round of discussion having there. And anyway, China's imposed 4 point, For the first point is that immediately Tibetan delegation should admit that Tibet was part of China. So, and secondly, they try to impose the colonial regime, so forth. So it was, to the eyes of Tibetan government and Lhasa, unacceptable. So it was a failed mission. Then the Ngapong Awan Jingmi was under the arrest of the Chinese military and hand of the Chinese military in the Chamdo area. So anyway, he under the pressure of Chinese generals, Ngapong Awan advised the government of Tibet at that time that we should negotiate with, if not, they will embed military and very huge and the consequence of massacres will occur, etc. So, at that time, 1950s and November 18th, His Holiness was really, really young. And we were just submerged everywhere by Chinese soldiers. And they are just about to enter to Lhasa nearly. But Tibetan government of that time asked His Holiness to take over the power and represent the Tibetan interest. So His Holiness, in spite of his young age, he took the power and he wrote a letter to the Mao Zedong that Tibet and China used to have sometimes good relations, harmonious relation, and under his leadership, he wanted to negotiate with Mao Zedong to a new era of peaceful coexistence. But 1951, as you know, as above mentioned, that another delegation led by the Galun Ngapong Awan Jingmi to Beijing, and just the Tibetan government instructed them to negotiate, instructed them that China's side should accept the sovereignty and the independence of Tibet, and Tibetans should be responsible defending its frontier and running all Tibetan government and Tibetan territories. Also, Tibetan government at that time instructed the delegation of Ngapong Awan Jingmi to return all the territories from Amdo come to the Tibet and Central Tibet. That was the initial instruction delivered to the delegation and to have basis for the negotiation. But the Chinese side, they never prove any political willingness to listen to Tibetan aspiration, Tibetan demands. So, as you know, in 1951, 23rd May, they imposed under duress the text known as a 17-point agreement. But on the other side, if you analyze this situation from other side, from international legal point of view, that China indirectly admit Tibet's sovereignty and Tibet as an independent nation because they accepted by protocol, by doing that they had to, they have the circumstance and the reason basis for negotiating by politically some kind of legitimacy to the invasion. So I think this is a really good historical text, although it is lacking totally legal basis and legal values. So we need to use this text, and as Gay Lehman well explained, and article by article, they has promised that to respect the existing legal political system of Tibet, and His Holiness as head of Tibet, all his competence and political power. So all this as and the figure in the provision of the 17-point agreement, and they promised also some kind of a national, regional, ethnic autonomy. All this mixture. Anyway, there has and figure in this text. But anyway, from when the Tibetan delegation sent a telegraph to His Holiness when he was based at the frontier region of Domo, he was for the security reason in there. And when His Holiness Dalai Lama received on 28th of May, the telegraph, His Holiness and the Prime Minister of that time you know, they were shocked. Everybody was shocked because His Holiness as head of state of Tibet and Prime Minister of Tibet, the government of that time, they never mandated delegation to sign whatsoever. So they were just sent and instructed just for negotiate and to make Chinese other Tibetan point of view. But instead, Chinese made them under pressure, sign a document, and also the product, as you mentioned, you know, a fake sale and used and signature, etc. So there are a lot of artificial base, and the delegation who have signed the document were not mandated by the central authority of Tibet to sign whatsoever. So from international legal point of view, there are lots of technically factor which disqualified this document. And this document, in the eyes of International Commission of Jurists in 1959, they constated that this document, through His Holiness 1959 June 20, His Holiness from Mosri issued a press release, you know, in which His Holiness has repudiated this document. So International Commission of Jurists stated that this discharged Tibetan side herself from the obligation of this treaty. It is well-known international relation practice. One is free to enter any kind of a bilateral, multilateral treaty. Also, one is free to get out of that kind of a treaty. Even it was case, you know, even it was case that Tibetan was always free to go out. For recent instance, example, when US and Russia have signed an international treaty on non-proliferation arms and, you know, nuclear weapon, etc. But Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from that treaty, and the Russian also, you know, withdraw that it doesn't exist anymore. And another quite recent example is the Budapest Memorandum, which has disarmed Ukraine from the, you know, becoming depository of the nuclear arms, and they just deport all transported to the Russia, and with the promise of the security guarantees. But you know, last 2-3 years since 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine, which is broken, and Budapest memorandums. And you know very well that 1997, Chinese government under leadership of Jiang Zemin has promised, with Deng Xiaoping promised British government through the mechanism of joint declaration, which is also a multilateral treaty, one country, two system for Hong Kong population. But now, under the national security law, Hong Kong become one of another banner ordinary city, one country, two system become one country, one system. So all this to illustrate us, you know, this type of example impose a treaty, an agreement, so-called agreement upon other weak side of the situation, and afterwards, those who are in the position of strength to just have broken their promise and do what they do, you know. So now today, if you look back to the Chinese propaganda, they need always to restore to the claim Tibet is an separate part of China. Why they need to repeat such kind of narrative when they go to international political discourse and diplomatic relations? They need from the Western and international member state of UN, European Union, they need support of for Chinese presence in Tibet, because they feel they're always lacking the legitimacy and legal basis for the invasion and the colonial rule. So that is, I think, very clear, even on the side of Beijing. Even today, they need the American EU leadership to repeat China's narrative on Tibet, to mislead international observers, international opinion. But we have to remember that under the international law perspective, Tibet is a people which entitles rights to self-determination. As a country, Tibet has been invaded and occupied illegally on violation of Tibet national sovereignty by its eastern neighbor. This is the true summary of the current situation. So, you know, this is my brief, interpretation of the historical context and its significance. And unfortunately, we are not alone as Tibet, as a people, being invaded, occupied, colonized. But under the visionary leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan administration, we have chosen a path of non-violence and middle way policy through which we try to find out and China get back to the table and try to find a peaceful solution. So even current authority, Xi Jinping's attitude is opposite of what we want. But anyway, China is not eternal. So China's communist regime also object of impermanent and subject to change. What is constant is change, changing nature, ephemeral nature of all phenomena in this world. And so according our Tibetan faith, our Tibetan philosophical vision of our life and the world. So we are convinced that with our determination, with our engagement and the non-violence to defend the truth surrounding Tibet's historic independent statue and people's right to self-determination, and also through the leadership, through middle approach, we try to negotiate, engage China, Beijing, and to negotiating table in order to find a solution which answers both sides' concern. Because we are condemned to live by side. We cannot choose our neighbors. So we believe in the sincerity or good faith of and the people of China, and the leadership party ideology might change. So we should keep motivated, determined in order to carry our freedom struggle. That is my remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tupten. Your remarks are very thought-provoking. I must say, both of you speakers have spoken extensively within a short period of time. I guess in everything, the essence of time is always important because in my mind, I have a lot to ask and to interrogate in terms of what you both have been spoken. I think let me just steal a few minutes to probe the both of you speakers before allowing our other colleagues from the Zoom to be able to pose questions or comments should they have any. I will return back to you, Mr. Guy. I mean, it was a brilliant and well-carved to go back to this 17-point argument. And as we all read this point with you, alongside with you, there are a lot of concern which probably I will just want your personal sentiment in some of the points that I might raise. For example, on one of the points I read, it says the Tibetan people shall unite and drive out invading imperialist forces. In your thinking, what was the reference in terms of imperial forces in that context?
The last army that was outside army that was inside Tibet was in 1929, which was the Manchurian army. So I'm not sure, maybe Dr. Geltzola would be able to clarify, but I am not sure when the CIA, who we know provided some arms to the Tibetan army. I'm not sure when that, in the timeline, when that happened. So it could be that the Chinese leadership were just sort of like generating this perception that there was this imperialist force inside Tibet. And it could be that they were referring to the forces from the US, whatever small amount of assistance the CIA had provided. I want to ask Gyotula, do you know about the time? I mean, who they were referring to?
Regarding the so-called Western imperialist intervention or presence in Tibet, it is just a piece of lie, because as you mentioned, British invasion of Tibet was very early of the 20th century, and in 1950s, there was around 10 Westerns, 10 Western persons who were in the Tibetan capital. So it doesn't, I think we should remember, as Gay, you have written provision with the 17-point arguments text, and in which the choice of a terminology, Chinese deliberately chose the central government. And when they mentioned to the Tibetan government, they say deliberately and the readers, to the auditors, local government. So the Chinese political psychology, they think they are at the heart of the world, the middle kingdom, this is a Chinese typical psychology, middle empire, if you want. The term in Chinese, Zhongguo, Zhong is middle, Guo is a country or nation. Now they think they are middle empire. This is, I think, typically to deal with Chinese psychology more than a political historical consequence. That's one thing. And the other thing is to minimize the importance of the partners. They consider like peripheral representative from peripheral or frontline kingdoms or representative. It has been always all imperialist used to present their partners as subhuman, under not on the equal foot. That is also, as well known by the colonialist representatives and literature. You will see Africans, how they are very present in the Eurocentric rhetorics, how the Africans presented primitives, backward, barbaric, non-civilized. And, it's not something new. Because when the Russian invaded the Eastern European countries, they used also the same expression. The Poland, all Eastern Europe's returned back to the motherland. In Chinese language, motherland, before prior to communist regime, doesn't exist in Chinese. Motherland, and in Tibetan literature, we would talk about fatherland, patri land, So it is really a transposition of the Russian culture into the Chinese, include the Marxist and Lenin ideological literatures. This is very new for China. So I'm not surprised by that China present themselves as an anti-colonial force to help Tibetan draw out the imperial force. But the question is, who asked them to come intervene in Tibet? Who asked them to come? Who has mandated them on basis of what legal basis to come to Tibet and rule Tibet? His Holiness, in different occasions, he refers the Chinese presence in Tibet is a guest without invitation. That is sum up really exact defines our current relation with China. So China doesn't have international mandate to civilize us or to rule us or to modern us, because the question of Tibet is not about a choice of first Prime Minister Galun Tibet, Professor Samdo Rinpoche used to tell us when I was in Varanasi on different conference. He used to tell us Tibet issue is not a choice of style of lifestyle. Tibet issue is not about a choice of ideology between atheist and religious ideology. Tibet is question is about the freedom of people of Tibet, its sovereignty. It is about rejecting the Chinese interference, which is a foreign interference and another country's internal effort. So China's themselves, one other topics such as Taiwan or Second World War, Opium War, they present themselves on the world stage as a victim of foreign interference, foreign this intervention, this and that. But what is about Chinese invasion, and when they send 40,000 militaries and in the name of the so-called peaceful liberation, all this contradict goes against international legal principles of national sovereignty and territorial integrity of another neighboring nation. So this is, is all about truth. His Holiness used to tell us by saying, we don't have economic might, we don't have a military might like China, but we have the truth on our side. And we should use the most powerful weapon, which is the truth and power of truth and non-violence. And we are legitimate to fight for our rights, which is fundamental right to be free and run our own country. That is this very simple, So
that's very interesting. Thank you so much, Tuten.
May I just, Dr. Atta, may I just respond on a quick personal experience that I had in Tibet?
Yes,
may
please.
I? Okay, so it's interesting you mentioned the liberation, they came to liberate that particularly because of what the Tibetan culture and the Buddha Dharma brings to the world, that word specifically. But I was in '97 when I traveled. I was traveling with a French adventure photographer that was looking. We went far into East Tibet to look for these mythical horses that were these midget horses, small dwarf horses, in this deep, long valley called Rinpoche. And we traveled for a couple of weeks. And when we got, we had Tibetan guides with us, and we were in a 4x4. And we got to the prefecture, and we had to go and present ourselves. It was, first of all, it was very dramatic because they beat up our guides for even coming this far. But they said while we were forbidden from traveling up that valley, is that valley was not yet liberated land. The Chinese hadn't been up. It was a very long valley. It was, hundreds and hundreds of miles. I'm not sure, but they said it was not yet liberated land, which was fascinating. That was the language, and we were forbidden from doing it.
Thank you so much for that, Art. What an experience. A colleague, time is really challenging. There are a lot of things to ask. Captain, maybe just to add flesh on something that you mentioned regarding the new era of peaceful coexistence that was suggested, I think, by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Probably just give us a form to substance in terms of what was the form of that coexistence, maybe in 1 or 2 minutes before I open up the meeting for our other colleagues. I see Tagata. I'm sure she has quite a lot to ask or comment. I get back to you. Okay.
Thank you. As I told you that after having received the telegram from Beijing, this bad news about on so-called 17-point agreement, and His Holiness Dalai Lama tried to expect their return from Beijing, and from China's side they divided the Tibetan delegation, and Galung Apong Awan Jingmi and other person dignitaries with 8,000 or 5,000 soldiers went back to Tibet through Chamdo, and Chinese generals with other Tibetans went through Calcutta to Tibet. anyway, the first Chinese general met His Holiness Dalai Lama in Rome area, and His Holiness refused and grant him audience firstly, and then to accept whatever on the side of Chinese side. So His Holiness have waited until the physical presence of the Galung Apong Jingmin, and he went back to Lhasa. And when they met, and His Holiness first remarked, the Prime Minister of the time, Lu Gongwa, and His Holiness told them, you are not instructed or neither mandated to sign whatsoever. So what happened to you? So the delegation remark was they were under huge pressure, which is under duress, and so they even fabricated a fake Tibetan government seal and from Chinese side, and then they used that in the very formal, well-screened political scenario, which is Chinese always propaganda shows. So that is one thing. And after that, after having assumed the Tibetan political responsibility, His Holiness as head of state, he read a letter direct to Mao Zedong to explain his willingness to negotiate, to meet him, etc. And His Holiness tried to really engage through a peaceful meaning to find a solution instead of a military confrontation, which is not in our favor. And 1950, even in November, on November, 3rd November, I remember that Tibetan government of that time sent a delegation to UN, sent a letter UN to ask to seek a UN mediation, also support from international community. But the Indian mission of that time discouraged Tibetans that you should privilege, or rather more regional into between China, India, India, and Tibet, some kind of trilateral solution. But anyway, that didn't happen. And 2 months later, 1950, even the 1951 December, somewhat that they sent another letter to UN to seek a UN mediation over the situation. But anyway, we didn't have met such huge support. And Salvador also initiated a resolution, etc. Donc, at that time, there was on UN level, Tibetan government took some initiatives by sending letters. Also, on the other hand, His Holiness, under the leadership of His Holiness, he tried to really have a talk highest level with Mao Zedong, but China always promised one thing, and they never applied the provision of the treatment 17th-Point agreement. So the ultimate goal was to dissolve Tibetan government and to eliminate progressively Tibetan leadership. That is how it happens, and the event around surrounding 10th of March 1959, because Chinese military garrison in Lhasa extended an invitation to His Holiness Dalai Lama to assist a cultural show program without being accompanied by his personal bodyguards, which is really aroused a huge suspicion within Tibetan population. That is why spontaneous Tibetan crowds come out by tens and thousands and courtyard of the Nobelinka, in front of the Nobelinka, the summer palace of His Holiness Dalai Lama in Lhasa. And then the uprising was happening, and people were called and withdraw of Chinese army from Tibet and to restore Tibetan full independence at that time. So that is, how it happened. His Holiness tried to, during 8 years, try to negotiate, try to reach out Chinese leadership and whatever meaning. But from the other side, the true intention was to invade and to install a colonial regime. So that is why our effort doesn't meet any concrete outcome. So that is why even His Holiness' security and safety was under threat. So that is why His Holiness and all his member of the Gashak, Ministry Council, member of government, and the tutors, all others, organized and through a very, very discreet trip to India and seek to fight back from India for the freedom and for the justice of Tibet. That is, I think, His Holiness attempt to deal peacefully with the highest leadership of China, which is his counterpart was Mao Zedong. Mao Zedong, when His Holiness met Mao Zedong, he told him that Tibet is materially not so developed, so China was willing to help to modernize or provide some material development after when China will withdraw their prisoners and militaries. But it was, verbal, oral promise. So China, true intention was, with the help of the Russian Stalin, to extend communist bloc and the Eastern Europe and Asia. So that was also during beginning of the Cold War and the world. So the world was divided into two blocks. One side known as capitalist bloc, and other side is a communist influential blocks. So that was how characterized the states of the world effort at that time.
Thank you so very much. For bringing a lot of other key external factors that has to play into all this. Colleague, because we are against time, let me just open up the floor for other participants. If you have a comment or a question that you may want to pose to one of our speakers, there is a reaction icon on your device. You can just raise your hand as you see mine on there. Then I'll allow you to pose your question or bring up a comment. Is there any? Godubla, I know you have something to say. I always pull your legs. Maybe you may want to step in. I'm sure after retirement, you've been reading a lot.
Hello.
Yes, please.
Okay, Atta, I just really wanted to take this opportunity to say hello to all my colleagues with whom I had a very good opportunity to work with them, especially and Atta yourself. And yeah, this is very interesting, to revisit the 17th-Point agreement, So no, this is my personal observation. What would have happened had we had sort of not signed it, even under the threat of violence? This is sort of a speculation. Would it have a positive effect on the Tibet's freedom struggle? Or because after signing the 17th-Point agreement, we had to cooperate with the Chinese government, CCP, to make roads. Because before, the Tibet was very, very secure, all over the side there's mountains. So they would not have, I think, come easily, if the Tibet had some military assistance. I think we could have, this is my own speculation, we could have not really stopped, or, there has been some chances, But over these 9-10 years, we assisted the Chinese in making roads. And with the road made up to Lhasa, they brought the tanks, equipments, everything, and the Chinese army. If we had stick to the not signing it to it, today's our international sort of case for Tibet's freedom would be much more stronger. I don't know which is, I want to leave it to both the speaker, what would be the positive and the pros and cons of not signing, had we not signed it,
Thank you so much, Godubla, for such brilliant comment. Actually, these are some of the questions that individuals like myself, of course, will always ask. You are tempted to want to live outside reality, to pose this, to pose that, to say, okay, in obvious or out of obvious cases, what will have happened if things have not gone this way? I think that such type of projection, I think, is just human. Is there any comment, question from anyone? If not, maybe we allow the two speakers to give us a closing remark from their side. Tupten, I will start with you. Maybe just take a minute and give us your closing remark, and then after Mr. Gay. Unmute yourself, please.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me allow to be brief and short. Anyway, as under the visionary leadership of far-sighted leadership of His Holiness Dalai Lama and the Central Tibetan administration, which has modernized its political system into a democratic political regime last 65 years. So we have got now a democratic process. We'll have learned during our presence in India, through Nepal and West Europe and America. Now we Tibetan get more and more smart and enough competent enough to to protect and to defend our fundamental rights with help, with back, and with support of our international friends, organizations, individuals, government, parliaments. So now we are on good trend. Even after the outbreak of the coronavirus and lack of transparency, lack of political willingness to be reliable, accountable on the side of Chinese authority vis-a-vis the world, and its well-being in public health has been neglected due to that Chinese lack of transparency, accountability. Now, West and many democratic nations, even there are some wake-up call and within the African countries that Chinese government is not a accountable regime. It is just behaving like a new colonial power. They try to show one package of money, then the true intent is to exploit them at the expense of a local population everywhere in the name of the one belt and one road, new version of colonial links, economic, commercial, mercantile ideology. So I think on long term, Africans, all those countries who try to join this initiative now come to realize they are under the financial debt traps. So I mean, so there's more and more friends across the world who come to learn Tibetan situation, what the Tibetan people endures the last more than 70 years. So I think now even the Communist Party's legitimacy has been last 40 years, that economic development and they pretend of having elevated a few hundred of Chinese citizens from the poverty, etc. Nowadays, economy downturn and the party's legitimacy getting weaker and weaker. A long term, we should live in good faith and in the sincerity of the Chinese people and their discernment, and they will support the truth of Tibetan struggle, and they will join us as an alliance of democracy, alliance of justice, to recognize Tibetan people's right as theirs. So our long term, I'm quite optimistic. So we are in good direction, in the right direction, with good and solid basis. So we have the international law on our side. we are in a movement of a totally non-violent, dedicated movement. And although even there are armed conflict, if, for instance, the Middle East, this conflict happens since last 1940, something like, Middle East problem is always has been a violent conflict, but still today we don't have a solution of two-state. And a Russian military adventure in Ukraine is, I don't think will end up, not with winners, because in this kind of situation to come out are triumphal forces, impossible in modern warfare. So the Tibetan movement, due to His Holiness' vision, compassion, and his vision of oneness of humanity, which took account interest of, and concern for other side. So long-term Chinese people will join His Holiness and to recognize, to engage in our mutually beneficial relations and mutual recognition. So I think this is my note of optimism and hope for a better future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Guy.
Thank you. First, to just respond to Nudupla, honestly, knowing how the Chinese, to your question, knowing how the Chinese sort of operate, I don't think it would have made much difference had they forced the signing or not. It was an invasion, and maybe it would have been a matter of time. I'm not sure how long the Tibetan army could have held off. I'm not sure. I think it was only a matter of time, and their intent was set. And then to Tukuna's comment, I got involved in the Tibetan freedom struggle more than half my life ago. I grew up in apartheid South Africa, born there, now live in Israel. So I've had these conflicts on either side, and at that point, something about obviously the Tibetan culture and the Tibetan cause, but one of the things that has held me to the compellingness of the Tibetan cause is this non-violence, and the fact that so many of the causes in the world that attract the attention of the world are so very violent, and that sort of like violence rules and holds the attention of the media and of the governments. The Tibetan cause in and of itself is worthy and has to be addressed. But the fact that it is a non-violent cause, if the Tibetan cause won, if the Tibetan autonomy was genuine, if His Holiness could return safely, all these examples, it would be a major breakthrough for human society to be able to see that non-violence, peaceful resistance has a direction it's supposed to go. So long live His Holiness and Tibetan cause. And hopefully we will all be celebrating in Lhasa.
Thank you so very much. Elizabeth, are you there to give us a closing remark? Is Jamyang having a comment to add before Elizabeth give us a closing remark? Jamyang, are you there? Okay, over to you, Elizabeth. Great to see you again,
yes,
Elizabeth. It's been a while.
Yes, lovely to see you too. I don't know whether you can hear me because my internet isn't very stable. So,
we do hear
but thank you very much to the speakers. Lovely to see you, Guy, and also my other friends, Nandula. Atta, I don't see you, but I'm sure you're there. We hear you quite clearly. But thank you very much. And I'm always one for more practical situations. We do a lot of talking, and I know His Holiness always says at the end of meetings, what's the next step? And that would be interesting to know from a practical point of view. What have you in mind? And you don't necessarily have to voice it now, but certainly that's something that we have to think about. Has a delegation ever been back to China, or have they approached China for negotiations? Because I think the last one was many years ago. So is that on the cards, or has there been any approach at all? Thank you very much.
Thank you, colleague. I hope to see you in our next webinar sometime soon. It was great to have you, Mr. Gay and Mr. Tupten. I am more convinced that you were the best choice for this topic. I mean, with all the insight that you have put forward, we take it at heart. We will have more deeper reflection as time goes on. A hello to Nikki and every other person that has joined us in this webinar. Thank you to Dawa Dolma from Tibettv, who has made it possible for us to be on this platform, as well as the various social media platforms that our colleagues who are not here today may have time to revise and revisit the conversation that we have had. Thank you so much for your time. Hope to see you again. Have a great evening ahead. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Atta. Thank you very much, Sutumna. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Elizabeth, thank you so much.
Thank you.
There's no light, you know, so yeah, light is...
Okay.
Yeah, having our problems.
So it's ready.